You need to do in order for you to get one. And now we are going to move on to the last 8 years. Dr. Patrick Njoroge has been at the helm of Kenya's fiscal policy, a man that many saw as an unconventional regulator who stuck to the rules at all costs, earning him the title of a disciplinarian for his strictness that saw financial institutions adjust or risk hefty penalties. But after serving for 4 terms, he exited the stage, leaving the financial sector a better place. This is according to the Kenya Bankers Association, having steered it during the COVID-19 pandemic. Jimmy Mbogo now takes a look at some of his key hits and misses and what the sector investors expect from Dr. Thugge, who takes over at a time when banks are transitioning to a risk-based pricing model and a depreciating shilling that has left the forex reserves almost in the red.
June 17, 2015, and the little-known Dr. Patrick Njoroge appeared before the Parliamentary Committee on Finance, Trade and Planning as the nominee for governor of Kenya's Apex Bank. And after his approval by the Benjamin Langat-led panel, Njoroge was set to start a journey that would go full circle, allowing him to serve for 2 terms at the helm of the central bank. He was not your regular nominee. From turning down the luxurious motorcade and bodyguards that characterized the position to living in a dome-like environment, the would-be toppings of power were of no interest to him. Months after his appointment, Njoroge began cracking the whip, putting Chase Bank under receivership in April of 2016 for being unable to meet its financial obligations. This was later followed by the fall of Dubai Bank and Imperial Bank, exposing the banking sector weak underbelly and how managers were playing quick and loose with the banking regulations, failing to assess the bank's risk and putting depositors at risk of losing their deposits. These incidences sent shockwaves within the banking sector.
When Governor Njoroge came to the seat at Central Bank, I would say it was almost like baptism by fire. So it was a period when there was quite a bit of volatility in the market. There was that lack of certainty on what's going to happen in the future. And, in the banking sector, when there's that uncertainty, quite a number of things can go wrong. So he comes in at that point in time, and one of the things that I think we should credit him for having steered the industry through that storm, quite effectively. We saw quickly the bank regain its stability, things started picking up. And then soon after, of course, there was another storm. So he has more or less been, it's like riding or steering a ship that is in a heavy storm. But
before long, Njoroge would face a challenge he had not anticipated. The introduction of interest rate capping law in September of 2016, as Parliament sought to cushion Kenyans from high interest being charged by banks. The measures would then hold for the next 3 years, testing his managerial skills in navigating that environment, an issue that bankers now say it endeared him to the sector.
He put in some frameworks to ensure that when the capping law is repealed, the banking sector will operate in an environment that will not make it go back to the very reasons why the capping law was put in place. So we saw him bring in place the banking sector charter, which was meant basically to guide the banks to operate in the new environment, but in a responsible way.
To no one's surprise, President Uhuru Kenyatta in June of 2019 extended Njoroge's term, allowing him to serve for a second and last term. It was during that period that his true test would then come, starting with the phasing out of the old notes in a move to combat money laundering and corruption in the country while adhering to the new constitution. With those holding more than 1 million shillings in cash expected to offer an explanation over the source of the money.
Convert your currency. Walk to a bank. Do what you can to make sure that this happens. What is most important now is to make sure that people have vacuumed their houses.
Many of us were not anticipating it. So when it was announced on, I think it was on the 1st of June, it caught many of us by surprise. But that's how it should work. If you had money that you could not explain, you see, then the system was such that he held such a tight shop in the sense that there was no way somebody was going to infiltrate the system and bring in that money that he could not explain from wherever it is. Yeah. And banks were kept specifically on the alert of the fact that anybody trying to go against the laid down regulations, you'll face personal consequences as a CEO. That's how strict it was. And no wonder he achieved what he wanted to achieve, in the sense that any illicit money was kept out there. It was never returned back into the system.
It was, however, his push for the regulation of digital lenders that cemented his leadership role, having equated them to Shylocks over their name and shame behavior while collecting credit issued to Kenyans, as well as steering the banking sector through the COVID-19 pandemic, which saw Kenyans enjoy lower interest and transaction costs when moving money from bank to mobile wallets as part of measures to reduce the spread of the pandemic.
When we had COVID, I think we managed the country's fiscal affairs, the monetary policy, everything was quite okay.
Njoroge then had to come up with some measures to support the banks to be able to support their customers. So things like, for example, in terms of relaxing the reporting requirements for the banks to be able to on lend appropriately or cater for the customers who are already getting challenged because of the COVID challenges. Things like, for example, trying to provide liquidity. So the cash reserve ratio, for example, went down.
But his management of the currency, however, left a stain on what would have been a remarkable 8 years in charge of the fiscal policy, where over the 8 years, the shilling depreciated steadily from an average of 98 shillings against the US dollar in 2015 to over 140 shillings by the time of his exit, with interbank rates already out of sync with the central bank rates, an issue that the banking expert accused him of overvaluing the shilling.
I think the interest rates could have increased much faster. We increased our rates from 7% to 9.5%, while the Western world was increasing at a much faster pace. I think that's one of the reasons why I think the Kenya shilling depreciated at a much faster rate than it should be. And I think another area I think he should have probably looked into is to understand and reason out why there is a lack of forex in the market. I think he kept on insisting that there's enough forex reserves with the banks, but I think the reality was also that the CBK rate and the rate which was being the rate at which the currencies were being exchanged was quite different.
The revolving doors of the office have now turned from Dr. Njoroge to his successor, Dr. Thugge. Dr. Thugge served as the PS at the National Treasury, influencing fiscal policy before he was kicked out of the National Treasury building over a 63 billion dam scandal, which he says he was wrongly accused.
I hesitate to speak on it because it may verge on commenting on the court case. How the decision was made to continue with the prosecution of the CS and to make me a state witness, I think the best person placed to answer that question actually would be the DPP.
But the two doctors showed their differences in monetary policy approach, with Dr. Thugge proposing that Kenya should float dollar bonds to mop up dollars from the local market, an idea that his predecessor differed with. Now, that notwithstanding, all eyes will be on Dr. Thugge to see what he does, having inherited a quote-unquote steady ship.
Dr. Thugge comes in at a time when the ship has been steered through the storm and is still sailing steady, and so he needs to come in and take the mantle, so to speak, and also, adopt the same kind of, steady steering of the ship, because that's what now the market expects.
Sector players have argued that Kenya's central bank needs to prioritize a risk-based pricing model, arguing that it will unlock investment into the sector.
There are a number of challenges that I think Dr. Thugge would meet. One of them, for example, is there is the introduction of the risk-based pricing. Dr. Thugge will then have to quickly get them out of the way, because it's only by all of them having theirs approved and therefore playing by the rules that have been set that we'll now start seeing credit flowing, because then banks are able to price the risk appropriately based on the rules that have been set, and then be able to now on-lend to segments that initially were not being on-lent to.
Where I'm a bit disappointed, concerned, is it's taken too long for this model to be adopted. Rate caps were repealed back in 2019. Here we are 4 years later, still having these discussions that some banks haven't been able to get their approvals and or haven't been able to adapt.
However, many view that his handling of the Kenya shilling, which has been fast depreciating against the US dollar, will be the true test of his term at the central bank.
We hope that with that progress and the support from the central bank in particular, we'll see more pickup on the interbank market, and therefore banks able to transfer liquidity across themselves, and even things like price discovery in the market, becoming now the order of the day, and therefore the dollar with the shilling exchanging at the true price, in the market.
With the cabinet having approved the proposed changes to increase the transaction limit from 1 million shillings or $10,000 as per the international standards and raise it to 2 million shillings, this could be one of his truest tests for the former Treasury PS, whose time at the helm of the CBK could make or break his already dented image in civil service. Will he serve the interests of the country or the interest of the few powerful elite? Time will surely tell. Jimmy Mbogo, KTN News.
Right, that story from Jimmy Mbogo completes this edition of Business Today. My name is Kelvin Nyakundi. Don't go too far. Biu ya KTN is coming up next.